You ever notice how the enemy doesn't always come with a pitchfork? Sometimes he comes with a notification. Sometimes he comes dressed like their opinion, their rejection, their silence. And if you're not careful, you'll let a moment steal your momentum. But I came to tell somebody tonight, what used to bother you was training you. Every eye roll, every closed door, every unanswered text, it was building a muscle you didn't even know you'd need. You thought it was breaking you, but it was birthing you. Because when you don't train your spirit, life will train your emotions. And some of us have been emotionally reactive for so long that peace feels foreign. We call it personality. We call it just being real. But what if God is calling you higher? What if the version of you that's easily offended, constantly triggered, always explaining yourself, that's not the final draft? What if there's a steadier you, a quieter you, a you that doesn't have to clap back because heaven already backed you up? I'm not talking about being numb. I'm talking about being anchored. I'm not talking about pretending it didn't hurt. I'm talking about healing so deeply that it doesn't control you anymore. There is a grace available that makes you so rooted in who you are that chaos has to knock before it enters. And tonight, we are not just praying for thicker skin. We are training for stronger spirits. Emotional discipline is spiritual warfare, and most of us don't even realize we're on a battlefield when we wake up in the morning. We think the fight is out there, in the boardroom, in the group chat, in the family reunion, but the real fight starts in the mind before our feet even hit the floor. The enemy doesn't need to destroy your destiny if he can distract your focus. He doesn't need to close doors if he can keep you emotionally spinning in front of the ones already open. And so he studies your triggers. He memorizes your insecurities. He watches what makes you feel unseen, unappreciated, unloved. Because if he can provoke your emotions, he can interrupt your obedience. Emotional discipline is not about suppressing how you feel. It's about stewarding what you feel. There is a difference between having emotions and being governed by them. One makes you human. The other makes you unstable. And instability is expensive. It costs relationships. It costs opportunities. It costs clarity. When you are easily moved, you are easily manipulated. When your mood dictates your movement, you will find yourself walking away from things God told you to stay planted in and staying in things God told you to walk away from. Emotional discipline says, I feel this, but I will not let this lead me. The warfare is subtle. It looks like comparison when you were content 5 minutes ago. It looks like offense when no offense was intended. It looks like rehearsing a conversation in your head that hasn't even happened yet. And before you know it, you've built a whole narrative out of a single glance. That's not coincidence, that's combat. The mind is fertile ground, and whatever you allow to be planted there will grow. If you plant suspicion, you will harvest division. If you plant insecurity, you will harvest jealousy. But if you plant truth, you will harvest peace. Training yourself to be unbothered means recognizing that not every emotion deserves expression. Just because you feel it doesn't mean you must feed it. Some feelings are visitors. They are not residents. They knock, but you do not have to give them a key. You can acknowledge them without accommodating them. Yes, that hurt. Yes, that disappointed me. Yes, that frustrated me. And then you make a decision. Will I let this moment master me, or will I master this moment? So many of us grew up in environments where emotional chaos was normal. Raised voices were normal. Silent treatments were normal. Explosive reactions were normal. And so we learned to equate intensity with strength. But loud is not the same as powerful. Reactive is not the same as righteous. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is pause. That pause is not weakness. That pause is warfare. In that pause, you are disrupting a pattern. In that pause, you are breaking a generational habit. In that pause, you are choosing legacy over impulse. Emotional discipline requires self-awareness. You have to know what moves you. You have to know what threatens you. You have to know what makes you feel small so you can stop shrinking in response. Because the enemy will always aim at your identity. If he can make you question who you are, you will start defending yourself against shadows. You will over-explain. You will overcompensate. You will overextend. And all the while, you will be exhausted, not because of the assignment, but because of the agitation. Being unbothered is not about indifference. It's about identity. When you are secure in who you are, other people's confusion about you doesn't confuse you. When you are anchored in your calling, other people's criticism doesn't cancel you. Emotional discipline is saying, I know who I am, so I don't have to react to who you think I am. That is warfare, because insecurity is one of the enemy's favorite weapons. He whispers, they don't respect you. They're talking about you. You need to say something. And before you know it, you're fighting a battle God never assigned to you. The truth is, some of us are tired not from doing too much, but from feeling too much. Every comment hits deep. Every delay feels personal. Every inconvenience feels intentional. But what if it's not that deep? What if it's not about you? Emotional discipline allows you to zoom out. It gives you perspective. It reminds you that not everything is a personal attack. Sometimes it's just a human moment. And when you stop personalizing everything, you free yourself from unnecessary pain. You cannot control how people treat you, but you can control how you translate it. You are the narrator of your internal story. You decide whether that look meant disrespect or distraction. You decide whether that correction meant rejection or refinement. And the story you tell yourself will shape the strategy you choose. If you believe you are under attack, you will fight. If you believe you are under construction, you will grow. Emotional discipline also means delaying gratification. The gratification of the clapback, the gratification of the last word, the gratification of proving your point. There is a temporary satisfaction in reaction, but there is a lasting reward in restraint. When you choose not to respond immediately, you give wisdom room to speak. You give maturity room to breathe. You give God room to move. Some of the battles you're trying to win with words were never meant to be won with noise. Being unbothered does not mean you never address issues. It means you address them from a place of peace rather than panic. It means you confront without combusting. It means you communicate without collapsing. When your emotions are disciplined, your words are deliberate. You don't say everything you think, you say what builds. You don't respond to every accusation, you respond to what aligns with your assignment. There will always be something trying to pull you out of character. That's the test. Can you remain who you are when someone else is not who they should be? Can you stay kind when they are careless? Can you stay focused when they are messy? Emotional discipline says my character is not conditional. I don't adjust my integrity based on your immaturity. I don't surrender my peace because you surrendered yours. The more elevated your calling, the more refined your reactions must become. Because elevation attracts attention, and attention attracts opinion. If you are going to grow, you must develop the capacity to handle being seen without being shaken. People will project onto you. They will misunderstand you. They will mislabel you. And if you are not trained, you will spend your life correcting every narrative instead of creating impact. This is daily training. It's in the small things. The traffic jam, the delayed email, the unmet expectation, the tone you didn't like. Each moment is an opportunity to practice restraint. Each irritation is a repetition in the gym of your spirit. And over time, what used to trigger you won't even tempt you. What used to ruin your day will barely interrupt your hour. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started choosing. Emotional discipline is spiritual warfare because peace is power, and the enemy cannot dominate a mind that is decided. When you decide that your peace is non-negotiable, you stop negotiating with chaos. You stop entertaining drama. You stop rehearsing offenses. You become selective about what gets access to your energy, and energy is currency. Wherever you spend it, something grows. If you keep spending your energy on irritation, irritation will multiply. If you keep spending your energy on insecurity, insecurity will expand. But when you invest your energy in purpose, in growth and healing, you will begin to see fruit that no amount of criticism can uproot. Being unbothered is not passive, it is powerful. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows that staying grounded is greater than being loud, that self-control is greater than self-defense, that mastering your emotions is the first step to mastering your environment. Not every battle deserves your breath, and that is hard for some of us to accept because we were raised to believe that silence meant weakness. We were taught that if you don't respond, you lose. If you don't defend yourself, the lie wins. If you don't correct them, the narrative sticks. But what if constantly responding is the very thing draining you? What if the enemy's greatest strategy isn't to defeat you, but to exhaust you? Because if he can keep you arguing, explaining, proving, and defending, you won't have the strength to build what God called you to build. Every battle requires energy. Every argument costs something. Every time you rehearse that conversation in your head, your body pays for it. Your sleep pays for it. Your peace pays for it. And some of us are broke in the spirit because we have been overspending on conflicts that were never assigned to us. You have to learn to ask yourself, is this worth my bread? Not am I right, but is it worth it? There are people who thrive on reaction. They feel powerful when they can pull you into their chaos. They feel validated when you respond to their bait. And when you finally decide not to engage, they will escalate. They will poke harder. They will talk louder. They will try to provoke you publicly. But maturity is recognizing that just because someone throws a ball in your direction does not mean you are required to catch it. Some invitations are disguised as confrontations, and wisdom knows when to decline. We waste so much time trying to correct people who have already decided not to understand us. And you cannot clarify yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You can present facts, evidence, receipts, context, and still they will twist it to fit their narrative. At some point, you have to accept that peace is more valuable than being perceived as right. You can win the argument and lose your joy. You can win the debate and lose your focus. You can win the moment and lose momentum. Not every criticism deserves a response. Some criticism is constructive. It sharpens you. It stretches you. It exposes blind spots. But some criticism is simply projection. It is someone else's insecurity looking for a host. And if you are not discerning, you will internalize what was never yours to carry. You will start adjusting yourself to satisfy voices that were never authorized to shape you. And in trying to quiet them, you will slowly silence yourself. The truth is, some battles are distractions dressed up as duties. They feel urgent. They feel necessary. They feel justified. But if you step back, you will realize they are not aligned with your assignment. The enemy does not mind you being busy as long as you are not being effective. He does not mind you talking as long as you are not transforming. And if he can lure you into endless cycles of proving yourself, you will never have time to become yourself. Breath is life. The same breath you use to argue is the breath you need to pray. The same breath you use to defend is the breath you need to declare vision over your future. And when you are constantly out of breath from conflict, you cannot speak life into what matters. That is why you must guard your breath like you guard your boundaries. If it does not build, bless, or align with your purpose, it may not deserve your oxygen. Some of us feel compelled to respond because we are still healing from being silenced in the past. There was a time when you didn't have a voice, a time when your perspective was dismissed, a time when you were overlooked. And now that you finally have the platform, the confidence, the vocabulary, you want to use it every time someone challenges you. But healing also looks like restraint. It looks like knowing you have a voice and choosing when to use it. It looks like understanding that just because you were once ignored does not mean you must now react to everything. There is a difference between standing up for yourself and standing in every fight. One is rooted in identity. The other is rooted in insecurity. When you know who you are, you don't feel threatened by every opinion. When you are confident in your calling, you don't panic at every disagreement. You don't need universal approval to move forward. You don't need everyone to clap in order to continue. And let's be honest, sometimes we engage because our ego is involved. We tell ourselves it's about truth, but it's about pride. We tell ourselves it's about justice, but it's about image. We don't like being misunderstood. We don't like being misrepresented. We don't like feeling small. But growth requires humility. It requires the ability to let someone think they won without needing to prove that you could have destroyed the argument. It requires the confidence to walk away knowing that silence is not surrender, it is strategy. Not every rumor needs correction. Not every accusation needs explanation. Not every social media comment needs a reply. There are some fires that die when they are starved of oxygen. But when you keep blowing on them with your responses, they grow. And then you wonder why the drama won't end. It's because you're feeding it with your focus. Focus is finite. You only have so much of it in a day. And every time you shift it toward negativity, you are pulling it away from purpose. Imagine what would happen if you redirected all the energy you spend proving people wrong into building something right. Imagine the progress you would make if you stopped replaying what they said and started refining what you are called to say. There are seasons when God will allow misunderstanding to test your maturity. He will allow silence to test your trust. He will allow false assumptions to test your security. And the test is not whether you can argue your way out. The test is whether you can remain steady while being misread. Can you keep showing up with excellence when they question your motives? Can you stay consistent when they doubt your capability? Can you keep your spirit clean when their words feel dirty? It is not weakness to conserve your energy. It is wisdom. Athletes do not train at full intensity every second of every day. They know when to push and when to recover. They know that burnout is real. And emotionally, you are no different. If you are always fighting, you will eventually collapse. You were not designed to carry constant conflict. You were designed to carry purpose. Sometimes the strongest response is no response. Not because you are afraid, not because you are passive, but because you are disciplined, because you have decided that your future is too important to be derailed by temporary noise. Because you understand that your calling requires clarity, and clarity cannot coexist with chaos. There will be people who interpret your silence as defeat. Let them. There will be people who assume your quietness means guilt. Let them. There will be people who fill in the blanks with their own version of the story. Let them. Your responsibility is not to manage perceptions. It is to maintain integrity. And integrity does not require a constant defense team. The older and wiser you become, the more selective you will be about your battles. You will realize that some fights are rooted in differences that do not require resolution. Not every disagreement needs closure. Not every relationship needs reconciliation. Not every critic needs conversion. Sometimes growth looks like distance. Sometimes peace looks like disengagement, and disengagement is not always dramatic. It can be subtle. It can be choosing not to respond immediately. It can be choosing to wait 24 hours before sending that message. It can be choosing to talk to God before talking to them. It can be choosing to breathe deeply instead of typing quickly. In that space between stimulus and response, you find power. When you train yourself to ask, does this deserve my breath? You begin to see clearly. You begin to distinguish between what is urgent and what is important. You begin to recognize patterns. You begin to see how certain people only reach out when they want a reaction. You begin to notice how certain topics always derail your mood. And awareness gives you the ability to choose differently. Your breath is sacred. It carries your prayers. It carries your praise. It carries your promises. Do not waste it on every whisper. Do not spend it on every slight. There are bigger battles ahead that will require your full capacity. There are real injustices that will require your voice. There are divine opportunities that will require your confidence. And if you are depleted from fighting small wars, you will not be prepared for meaningful ones. The discipline of disengagement is a form of self-respect. It says, I value my peace too much to put it on the line for this. It says, I trust God enough to defend me where it matters. It says, I refuse to let temporary emotion sabotage eternal impact. And when you start living from that place, you will notice something shift inside of you. The need to react will lessen. The urge to explain will fade. The compulsion to prove will weaken, because you will realize that not every battle deserves your breath. And every time you choose wisely, you are strengthening your spirit, conserving your energy, and aligning your focus with something greater than the noise trying to pull you in every direction. At once, silence can be a strategy, but most of us were never taught how to use it that way. We were taught to fill every gap, answer every question, defend every accusation, correct every misunderstanding. We were taught that if you don't speak up, you disappear. And so we learned to use our voices as shields. We learn to talk quickly, explain thoroughly, and respond immediately. But there is a difference between using your voice with intention and using it out of insecurity. And sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to say nothing at all. Silence is uncomfortable because it forces you to sit with what you feel. When someone says something that cuts you, your instinct is to cut back. When someone misjudges you, your instinct is to clarify. When someone challenges you, your instinct is to defend, but silence interrupts instinct. Silence creates space. And in that space, you get to choose who you are going to be instead of reacting from who you used to be. There is strength in measured response. When you are silent, you are not powerless, you are observant. You are gathering information, you are discerning motives. You are allowing emotions to settle before they spill. And spilled emotions are expensive. Words spoken in anger can take years to repair. Decisions made in frustration can redirect entire destinies. Silence protects you from permanent damage caused by temporary feelings. Some people interpret silence as weakness because they only understand volume. They think the loudest person in the room holds the most authority. But real authority does not have to announce itself. It does not have to compete. It does not have to prove. When you are secure, you can afford to be quiet. When you are confident, you can afford to wait. When you know who you are, you don't feel pressured to convince everyone else. Silence also reveals people. When you stop responding the way you used to, you start seeing who was attached to your reaction. Some individuals are not connected to you. They are connected to the version of you that reacts. They are connected to the drama, the back and forth, the intensity. And when you go quiet, when you refuse to engage, when you decline the argument, their discomfort exposes their intention. Silence becomes a mirror, reflecting motives you could not see when you were busy defending yourself. There is also a sacredness to silence. It is in silence that you hear clearly. When you are constantly talking, constantly venting, constantly processing out loud, you drown out wisdom. Silence gives wisdom room to surface. It allows you to ask deeper questions. Why did that trigger me? What am I afraid of? What part of me feels threatened? Instead of projecting your pain outward, silence invites you to look inward. Not every thought deserves to be spoken. Not every opinion needs to be shared. Just because something crosses your mind does not mean it must cross your lips. Discipline in silence is about filtration. It is about running your words through the grid of purpose. Does this build? Does this heal? Does this align with who I am becoming? If not, maybe it belongs in your journal, not in the conversation. Silence can de-escalate what noise would inflame. When two people are shouting, the conflict grows. When one person lowers their tone, the atmosphere shifts. You cannot control another person's volume, but you can control your own. And when you choose silence instead of sarcasm, restraint instead of retaliation, you create the possibility for peace where there could have been permanent fracture. There are moments when silence is protection. You do not have to share every plan. You do not have to announce every move. You do not have to reveal every strategy. Some things grow better in private. Some dreams are too fragile to be exposed to premature opinion. Silence guards vision. It allows what is forming to mature before it is scrutinized. Because not everyone clapping for you has the capacity to cover you. And let's be honest, sometimes we overshare because we crave validation. We want reassurance. We want applause. We want confirmation that we are on the right track. But validation from people can become addictive. Silence breaks that dependency. It teaches you to be affirmed internally. It teaches you to trust what God told you even when no one else understands it. It teaches you to move without needing an audience. Silence is also powerful in conflict. When someone is trying to provoke you, your silence disrupts their script. They expect you to argue. They expect you to defend. They expect you to match their intensity. And when you do not, it unsettles them. Not because you are ignoring the issue, but because you are refusing to participate in dysfunction. Silence says, I will address this when I am calm, not when I am triggered. There is a maturity that comes with delayed response. You don't have to answer immediately. You don't have to reply the second you receive the message. You don't have to solve the conflict in one conversation. Silence gives you time to pray, to process, to gain perspective. It allows you to separate facts from feelings. It allows you to respond instead of react. Some of us fear silence because we equate it with abandonment. If we are not talking, we assume connection is fading. If we are not explaining, we assume we are losing control. But silence does not always mean distance. Sometimes it means depth. It means you are choosing to process thoroughly rather than perform emotionally. It means you are valuing long-term peace over short-term expression. Silence can also be an act of trust. Trust that truth does not need constant defense. Trust that integrity speaks louder than argument. Trust that if you are consistent, your character will outlast rumors. There is a quiet confidence that comes when you stop chasing every lie and start living so authentically that lies lose credibility on their own. When you are always talking, you rarely listen, and listening is strategic. When you listen, you gather insight, you understand patterns, you notice inconsistencies. You hear what is not being said. Silence sharpens discernment. It allows you to read between the lines. It allows you to respond to the root instead of the surface. There are times when silence is mercy, when you could say something cutting, but you choose kindness. When you could expose someone's flaw, but you choose grace. When you could embarrass them publicly, but you choose discretion. Silence in those moments is not weakness. It is compassion. It is recognizing that winning the moment is not worth wounding the relationship. And then there are times when silence is boundary. It is stepping back from conversations that drain you. It is refusing to entertain gossip. It is declining to participate in negativity. You don't always have to confront. Sometimes you can withdraw. Sometimes you can change the subject. Sometimes you can simply not respond. Silence becomes a fence around your peace. Training yourself to use silence strategically requires self-control. It requires resisting the urge to fill awkward pauses. It requires tolerating discomfort. It requires letting someone else have the last word without feeling diminished. That is not easy. Your ego will protest. Your pride will whisper that you are being overlooked. But growth often feels like loss before it reveals itself as strength. Silence gives you room to evaluate your intentions. Are you about to speak to heal or to hurt? Are you about to respond to resolve or to retaliate? Are you about to clarify or to control? In silence, you confront your motives. And sometimes you realize that what you were about to say would have satisfied your ego, but sabotaged your evolution. There is a rhythm to wisdom. It speaks when necessary and rests when not. It does not rush. It does not panic. It does not scramble to defend itself. Silence aligns you with that rhythm. It slows you down. It reminds you that not everything requires immediate commentary. You will discover that the more you practice strategic silence, the less chaotic your life becomes. Fewer arguments, fewer misunderstandings, fewer regrets, because you are no longer scattering words carelessly. You are intentional, you are measured, you are grounded. Silence will not always feel powerful in the moment. Sometimes it will feel like swallowing fire. Sometimes it will feel like injustice. Sometimes it will feel like you are letting something slide. But over time, you will see the fruit. You will see how many conflicts dissolved because you refused to fuel them. You will see how many opportunities remained intact because you did not burn bridges with impulsive speech. You will see how your peace expanded because you stopped giving every thought a microphone. And as you grow, you will realize that silence is not about shrinking. It is about sovereignty. It is about choosing when and how your voice is used. It is about understanding that your words carry weight and refusing to waste them on moments that do not align with who you are becoming. Silence becomes less about what you are withholding and more about what you are protecting, your clarity, your focus, your integrity, your calling, your peace. Your peace is a promise, not a personality. It is not something you were randomly born with, not a lucky temperament, not a trait reserved for people who just don't care. Peace is covenantal. It is intentional. It is cultivated. And too many of us have reduced it to temperament. We say, that's just how I am, I'm calm. Or we excuse our chaos with, that's just how I am, I'm passionate. But peace is deeper than personality. It is a decision rooted in identity. It is a promise you make with yourself that no matter what shifts around you, you will not allow everything to shift within you. Some of us grew up in environments where peace was rare, chaos was normal, tension was constant. You learned to survive in noise. You learn to function in dysfunction, and because of that, peace can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. When things get too quiet, you anticipate disruption. When things are going well, you brace for impact. You don't trust peace because you've never seen it last. But what if peace was never meant to be circumstantial? What if it was meant to be internal? If your peace is tied to people behaving correctly, you will rarely experience it. If your peace depends on everything going according to plan, it will constantly be postponed. If your peace is connected to validation, agreement, or applause, it will rise and fall with public opinion. That is not peace. That is preference. Peace that is a promise is not fragile. It does not evaporate at the first sign of inconvenience. It does not disappear when someone misunderstands you. It does not collapse when doors close. Peace as a promise means you decide ahead of time how you will respond when life does what life does. You pre-decide that your character will not be dictated by circumstance. You pre-decide that your worth will not be negotiated by rejection. You pre-decide that your joy will not be auctioned off to the highest bidder of drama. It is a commitment, and commitments are tested. There will be moments when everything in you wants to abandon that promise, when the disrespect feels personal, when the betrayal feels intentional, when the delay feels unfair, and in those moments, peace will feel like a sacrifice, because it is. It is the sacrifice of ego, the sacrifice of being right, the sacrifice of reacting immediately, the sacrifice of matching energy. But what you gain in exchange is stability. Peace is not passivity. It is power under control. It is strength that does not need to perform. It is confidence that does not need to announce itself. When your peace is a promise, you stop confusing intensity with authority. You realize that being loud does not make you strong. Being reactive does not make you real. Being dramatic does not make you deep. A lot of people think peace means you don't feel, that you don't get angry, that you don't get hurt. But peace does not eliminate emotion, it regulates it. You can feel disappointment and still be peaceful. You can feel frustration and still be grounded. You can feel anger and still choose wisdom. Peace is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of discipline. When you treat peace like personality, you risk excusing yourself from growth. You say, I'm just not a peaceful person, or I just have a short temper. But if peace is a promise, then it is something you actively pursue. It is something you train for. It is something you protect. You don't wait for it to magically appear. You build it through boundaries, through healing, through therapy, through prayer, through reflection, through choosing better environments. Your peace is too expensive to be common, and yet some of us hand it out cheaply. We surrender it over small comments. We forfeit it over minor inconveniences. We trade it for temporary satisfaction. But if you truly believe your peace is a promise, you will guard it. You will become selective about what you entertain. You will evaluate conversations before entering them. You will ask yourself whether this interaction aligns with the version of you that you are becoming. There are people who will test your commitment to peace. They will say things that press on old wounds. They will behave in ways that trigger former insecurities. They will attempt to pull you back into patterns you have outgrown. And if you are not intentional, you will confuse familiarity with destiny. Just because you know how to operate in chaos does not mean you are called to live there. Peace as a promise means you stop chasing closure from people who cannot give it. You stop expecting maturity from people who have not developed it. You stop demanding consistency from people who have never demonstrated it. Instead, you adjust your expectations and protect your equilibrium. You understand that not everyone is equipped to handle you gently, so you handle yourself wisely. Sometimes the greatest threat to your peace is not external. It is internal. It is the narrative you repeat in your mind, the replay of conversations, the what-ifs, the imagined confrontations, the rehearsed speeches. You can be physically removed from conflict and still mentally imprisoned by it. So keeping the promise of peace also means managing your thoughts. It means interrupting spirals. It means refusing to let your imagination create problems that reality has not confirmed. Peace requires trust. Trust that you are capable of handling what comes. Trust that even if things do not go as planned, you will not fall apart. Trust that your value is not diminished by someone else's inability to see it. When you trust yourself, you are less easily shaken. When you trust your foundation, storms do not scare you the same way. Your peace is also connected to your boundaries. You cannot promise yourself peace and then allow unlimited access to your energy. You cannot declare tranquility and then entertain toxicity daily. Boundaries are not walls to keep love out. They are gates to keep chaos from overrunning your soul. When you say no to what drains you, you say yes to what restores you. There will be seasons when maintaining peace requires distance. Distance from conversations that always turn combative. Distance from environments that normalize dysfunction. Distance from relationships that thrive on volatility. And that distance may be misunderstood. People may accuse you of changing. They may say you are different. But growth always looks like change to those who are comfortable with your old patterns. Peace is not about avoiding every conflict. Some conversations are necessary. Some confrontations are healthy. But the posture from which you enter them changes when peace is your promise. You are not entering to win. You are entering to resolve. You are not entering to dominate. You are entering to understand. You are not entering to prove your superiority. You are entering to preserve connection. There is also a rhythm to peace. It requires rest. It requires stillness. It requires moments where you disconnect from noise and reconnect with yourself. If you are constantly stimulated by news, by social media, by other people's emergencies, you will struggle to maintain internal calm. Peace flourishes in intentional quiet. It deepens when you slow down long enough to hear your own heartbeat. When peace becomes your promise, your reactions become rarer, not because you do not care, but because you care more about alignment than adrenaline. You stop chasing the rush of being right. You stop feeding off the intensity of argument. You stop mistaking chaos for chemistry. Instead, you crave stability, you crave clarity, you crave consistency. And over time, people will notice. They will notice that what used to trigger you no longer tempts you. They will notice that what used to derail you now barely distracts you. They will notice that you are less available for drama. Some will respect it. Some will resent it. But either way, your responsibility is not to manage their response. It is to honor your promise. Peace is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet decision to walk away. Sometimes it is the deep breath before responding. Sometimes it is the refusal to internalize what was never yours to carry. Sometimes it is the courage to apologize quickly. Sometimes it is the discipline to forgive slowly but sincerely. When you understand that your peace is a promise, you stop treating it like a mood. You stop saying, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. You start saying, no matter what side I wake up on, I will choose steadiness. You take responsibility for your atmosphere. You recognize that while you cannot control every circumstance, you can cultivate your internal climate. And the more you honor that promise, the more peace becomes your default. Not because life got easier, not because people got kinder, not because obstacles disappeared, but because you decided that your inner world would no longer be dictated by outer instability. You decided that your peace was sacred. You decided that your stability was non-negotiable. You decided that your soul deserves safety, and you committed to being the guardian of it every single day, in every single interaction, in every single season, regardless of who stays, regardless of who leaves, regardless of who understands, regardless of who applauds.